Hello and welcome to the next instalment in our Platform Insight series. I'm delighted to be joined by Rich Kenny, MD of Interact and a research fellow at LSBU, London South Bank University, an institute I know very, very well, having spent over a decade there as a senior academic myself and a short stint as Associate Dean of the Business School. So a lot of the people Rich has worked with over the years, I know very, very well and know the great work that the research team does there across the data center sector. Now, the reason we're here today is Rich, a little bit like our sector as a whole, has gone from relative obscurity to not necessarily the best public relations image across an industry that has liked to keep itself below the parapet and has suddenly found itself in the full-on headlights. So the reason we're doing this interview today is to talk about the Interact study that was published on behalf of, it was the government initiative. So maybe you could tell us a little bit, first of all, why the report was published, what the objectives of the report were, and then we'll go into a little bit about the backlash that we've received from that going forward. Over to you, Rich.
Cheers, Nicola. So it was part of the GDSA, so the Government's Digital Sustainability Alliance. I sit as the co-chair of the Planetary Impact Working Group, and the role of that group is to advise and support sectors within government on things they should be aware of around IT provision, procurement, and fundamentally sustainability impacts that are associated with that. And our group, Planetary Impact, we're covering way more than sort of just carbon, but we're covering water, biodiversity, we're covering social impacts and human slavery, and all these sort of myriad impacts that every IT purchase influences. So they said, we have an AI working group, we have Planetary Impact, we have Scope 3, really smart people, great teams across these areas. And we kind of wrote a blog about water use in AI because it was quite pertinent, and this was about 4 months ago. And on the back of the blog, the contact at DEFRA said, hey, would you mind writing a more in-depth report, because there's a lot of information here that we don't know on data center water use and AI water use. So I said, I know quite a lot about this. So yeah, I'll pop a report together. I've done a lot of research over the last year on this particular topic. We published in the IEEE Journal of Sustainable Computing in 2023 on temperature's impact on the IT in data centers. And everyone was saying around temperature, it doesn't really matter at certain levels of IT. And we were saying, well, let's look specifically at configuration. So we did a huge research study on thousands of configurations of IT. And then we created a location mapping function to say, if you take this data center and put it here, what's the impact on the IT with temperature changes? What happens with the cooling? So we did a huge amount of thousands of hours of research into data center location, heat, water use, and specifically around the IT. So that was the background on that. And so I was like, okay, well, taking all that and everything else we've done, let's expand that and let's try and give a balanced view on what water use in the data center sector looks like, not just in the UK, but worldwide. The cooling mechanisms in America are different to the UK and Europe. The way things are built differently. AI is changing the way everything's done. So we haven't really got a clear template for how to build an AI data center that is region agnostic. You know what I mean? There's a degree of learning required in where we are. And technology is moving really fast to deal with compute challenges and to deal with training challenges. So there's a big piece where it's like water is a significant issue in all industries, not just the data center. But the data center has a role to play in this because it's in certain areas and it is quite water intensive. And then so we wrote this report, we put it out there and we said, this is what we've seen, this is what the current research is saying, this is what these areas are looking like. And the idea of the report was to say, data centers are systems of systems, and one of these system impacts is water. So we always talk about energy, we always talk about carbon. Water's a thing. Like data centers use water. Some use a lot, some use a little. And the whole point of the report was location matters massively, and how you cool both the facility, how you produce electricity, how things are manufactured, all have a water impact that we should be aware of because it can be material to social outcomes.
Do you know?
And that was the point of the report.
I'm going to jump in just quickly because I want to make my position really clear. I read the report as soon as I saw it pop up on my LinkedIn feed. I actually thought it was a really balanced and really measured approach that actually spent most of its time highlighting potential issues. And there's key words within that report: risks and opportunities, potential, could, if. This is not something that says these facilities are doing these. These facilities are destroying the UK's landscape or globally. So I actually thought that this was a really good starting point. And as a lover of all things academic and loving a bit of academic research with an academic background to it as well, I actually thought it was a really, really good way of bringing this to the forefront. Unfortunately, what then happened, of course, was that certain publications jumped on top of this, turned it into hype for headlines and a little bit of clickbait. And I think I'm right in saying that you've borne the brunt of some of that. And I can't say I'm particularly proud of my entire industry, an industry I've loved for nearly 30 years. In the wake of this, would you mind, I know it's a little bit distressing, but would you mind sharing just a few of the comments that you've had in your inbox following the report?
Yeah, it was like a massive shock for me, this, because I was like, hey, here's a balanced report on things that we need to be aware of, stuff we should consider, and what we should do. And then I ended up getting a lot of direct messages that were pretty vile, actually, to be honest. There's like 4 that I could share with you. I won't say who they're from or anything, but one of the ones was, simple stuff like, clearly you've never been in a data center. And I'm like, well, been in hundreds, but thanks very much. One of my favorite ones is garbage report. You clearly have an anti-DC agenda, despite loving the data center industry and doing as much as I possibly can to help people see the best parts of it. Poorly researched, poorly written, complete bunch of lies was an excellent one. And my favorite one was, have you not read the Tech UK report? DCs in the UK hardly use water. You're an effing idiot. And I was like, brilliant. Thanks for that. Thanks for all your vital and useful points there. And these all come from people who have quite senior positions in some cases in the data center sector.
Yeah.
And there was dozens more.
Yeah. And if anyone that recognises...
I've heard words in other parts of my life, but it's not exactly particularly fair, is it?
No, absolutely not. And if anyone recognises their words, watching or listening to this, you should actually be ashamed of yourself, because that is not acceptable behaviour, regardless of whether the report was any of the things it's been accused of, which I know from knowing Rich's background, it absolutely isn't. So addressing some of the points in those comments, tell us about your background in data centres.
Yeah, so I've been on the hardware side of data center infrastructure for the best part of almost 30 years. Like, I bought and sold my first server when I was 11 years old. So like the hardware side is very much where my background is. And for years, no one cared about hardware in data centers. It's all facility. And that's turning because we realize that the IT is pretty important in a data center. But for the last 7 or 8 years, I've been running a business called Interact, which is entirely focused on decarbonization, IT performance, and fundamentally data center efficiency, focusing on the IT. And that's come with multiple research grants, multiple research outcomes as well. We've published 13 times in leading academic journals for free and open sourced it and given it away to say this is how data centers work from an IT perspective and from a location and a water perspective. I've looked at over 500 data centers in the last 6 years now, including massive ones for huge payment providers and governments and all the rest of it. And I've been inside a lot of those data centers. And a lot of it is very much sort of, when you're a systems thinking guy and your team is a systems thinking team, they ask you questions about everything, because it's not just the IT. They're like, should we look at liquid cooling 8 years ago? Should we look at this? Should we do this? What's the impact of X? And it's very much like, I'm always sort of it depends, but what information do we have and how do we make good decisions that look at everything? Not I sell chillers, so the solution's a chiller. I sell servers, the solution's a server. I'm a data center guy about efficiency. How do we get an efficient data center looking at everything and what touches what? For the last 5 years, we've been building hardware and systems-based digital twins in the data center sector. And the team at Interact, one of our doctors at Interact, Steve, and he's the co-chair of the digital twin working group for the OCP, and he works with Meta and NVIDIA and Cadence and all these great people who really know what they're doing. Yeah. And so we kind of know what we're doing.
And I think it's really important to get across, because what tends to happen in our industry is that people go up with somebody with no knowledge of our sector whatsoever, has just written this thing and is just trashing the industry. One, I don't think the report trashes the industry, but that's something else entirely. So I think it's really important for everybody to understand that actually you've probably got a stronger background in how all of this works and the impact of all of this than many, many people working within this sector that have come into it fairly new.
Yeah, I would say so, because we see all of the components. Whereas a lot of people are very, very good at one thing. Like people, people that work with chillers know way more than I know about chillers. People that work with UPSs know way more than I know about UPSs. But we have to know everything for simulation and for work and how they impact other systems. So the baseline level of knowledge across the entire facility and ecosystem is really high. And then in around the IT, it's monstrously specific and, probably the world's best. But it's really weird when you come out and write a report saying, this is something to look at because it could be an issue. Keyword could be an issue. And it just gets absolutely battered.
Absolutely. I'm going to come on to that in a minute because I've taken out a few key points that actually totally back up what you're saying there. This is forward looking. And addressing the thing about the comments about the Tech UK report. Now, the Tech UK report focuses entirely on what's currently going on, not what's happening in the future. And your report is there to actually flag issues that if the government's AI UK hub plan idea, whatever you want to call it, actually bears fruition over the coming decade, what do we need to think about to actually address that going forward to make sure we don't end up in the crap, basically? That's how I read it.
Yeah.
It's very, very
that's exactly how it would written.
They're not the same thing. It's like looking at apples and oranges. And what I don't think a lot of people understand is the rigorous nature of academic research. And having been somebody that worked in what I like to describe the real world for many, many years before ending up in academia, I was very, very surprised in a good way at how rigorous academic research actually is. And I don't think industry really take that into consideration when they read something like that from somebody who is from that background. It's far more rigorous than any commercial report you read from a McKinsey, from a specialist data center analyst house. It is peer-reviewed. To get into one of these journals takes months and sweat and tears and is reviewed by lots of experts on the subject. So you can pretty much safely say that if anything ends up in one of these journals, it has been checked, double-checked and triple-checked in terms of facts and its rigorousness. Could you give us a little bit of the background? So you're a research fellow at LSBU, and they've been working both across the School of the Built Environment and the School of Engineering with the lovely Professor Deborah on areas within circular economy and data centres for quite some time. What's your role been within that?
So I was part of the Tech Buyer team and then the Interact team on the SODASI project, which is a circularity in the data center industry project. I was with Astrid Wynn and Deborah. We had a really nice relationship there where we were providing a lot of the expertise around power usage, capability, and understanding the industry for data centers. And then the LSBU team was very much looking at lifecycle analysis and really comprehensive LCA stuff as they built that circularity compass. So we were providing a lot of the use phase mechanism, and we were even providing hardware for them to do the analysis of, like making sure they were using the right servers, realistic configurations to compare, things like that. And so that was a role then. I mean, that was 6 years worth of work. I think probably 3 or 4 directly with Deborah, and then became a visiting research fellow there to carry on further research into LCA and circularity. And Deborah and I have written 3 papers together. We've got one publishing in September on LCA analysis for storage because it's so important. Just got a really good relationship about how you apply academic rigor to industry questions. And my role is to pose the industry question of, this is real life and this is what this looks like. How can we provide useful and meaningful rigor to some of the questions around that? And like I said, it's very different to, here's a white paper from our data center where we want to tell you some good things about what we've done. And it's like, and that has a use too. Those white papers are brilliant, but there's a very big difference between that and, we forensically destroyed 3 hard drives down to material components involving, molecular analysis to understand where the stuff came from so we can identify social impacts of storage. That's very different to, we paid someone £17 to put it through ChatGPT to say how much carbon's in a hard drive. They're very different things. And if you're trying to answer difficult questions, you need a mix of both, because one of them saying this is quick and easy and what we think, and the other one saying we spent a lot of time and effort making sure this was as close to good as we can. So that's why I think the role of academia is so important in data center, because it's not marketing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Doesn't mean it's always facts, by the way. Just to be clear, it's not always facts, because depending on your sources, you can get it wrong. Yeah. But at least you're trying really hard.
Definitely. And one of the reasons I was so delighted when I saw your paper, and the other papers before, the one that you mentioned that was in the IEEE, I always miss an E when I'm saying that one or add an extra one. I love the fact that this is proper academic. My frustration is that it doesn't get more visibility industry-wide and globally because it is rigorous, very, very highly researched information based on facts as far as it can be. So I'd love to see more of the academic research in this making its way into the industry. And what I'm really worried about is that with what you've faced over the last week or two, in the storm that's blown up since, in fairness, the BBC decided to run their piece on this, has it put you off doing this and releasing everything into the sector?
Yeah. Truth be told, yeah. Like, you know, these people, you get stuff quite common saying, I hope you weren't paid much for this. And it's like, no, I actually just spent hundreds of hours in my own time for free trying to do something useful to say, don't make a mistake that could hurt us down the line as an industry, or let's try and not really damage communities by making a mistake that we can potentially avoid by asking 3 questions. Like, the whole point of this report was, what should we think about? And it's not anyone's wrong or anyone's bad. I could have written the exact same report about the automotive sector and said, when you build a car plant, we should think about how much water you're going to use in that car plant. And then, you know, but I don't know the automotive sector, so I couldn't help you with that one. Yeah. But it would be the exact same thing. Industry is going to have an impact. Can we please consider it? Because in our current policy, we don't consider the impact of an AI data center when we build it. Like, that is, I'm going to use a criminal, because it's absolutely criminal. Because if you take an AI data center and plop it in a water-starved region with no access to decent water, I don't care if you only need enough for a leisure center, you wouldn't have been allowed to build a leisure center there because that swim pool would use more water than we've got available. Or as a data center provider, my view would be, do you know how much water you're going to use in this facility? Like, specifically, yes, brilliant. Are you willing to invest in the infrastructure in that region to put in a small reservoir or to upgrade the water networks or work with whoever it is to ensure that not only do you have continuous supply, and this is a risk and opportunity management piece, but that you're not impacting local communities even by whatever small amounts you're taking out. And I would say that for every single industry that goes into a water-starved region, consider your water impact and how you're going to mitigate that to the lowest possible degree. But I'm less likely to write it down now, I suppose.
So back to the report itself. So, and again, I've been through it several times in detail, as much as anything, to try and find out where these bits of contention were. And whether it really was something that was very anti-data center. Knowing your background previously, I didn't really think that would be the case. And what I've picked out is, obviously it's about water use in AI and data centers. It refers back to the government plan for the AI hub for the whole of the UK. And you go into huge amounts of detail on the role of the water companies. It's not just about the data centers. You've already mentioned location. And it mentions things like identifying risks and opportunities. It's not going into, this is what's happening, oh my God, look at this, they're all evil. It is about having a balanced view about what we can do now to make sure that we haven't got problems down the road. So I've highlighted a whole paragraph here, and I've put in capital letters, if left unaddressed, the growing demand for water from AI could lead to significant social environmental conflicts. Now, I don't know anyone that I deal with on a daily basis in my industry who would dispute that. You know, that is just something that is there. That is as much an issue to do with our own national water infrastructure and how we manage that as it is anything to do with data centers. What would you say about that?
100%, like 100%. I'm very keen that this isn't a blame game of shifting around. Like, well, you know, our water companies aren't doing a great job, so blame data centers. That's why our water's bad. That whoever's saying that is wrong, like, for a start. But that isn't just data centers. That's everything. Like, I don't think our water infrastructure is fit for the country we're living in and going to be living in by 2030. And, you know, that's the start of the report, is that we have a deficit of water based on where we are right now of billions of litres per day. And the environmental agency is saying this. Every aspect of government is saying the status quo right now, without any additional stress, isn't suitable. So you can't build a car plant, you can't build a new supermarket, you can't build a new leisure centre. Well, you shouldn't be able to then just build a new data centre and put a gigawatt facility up for machine learning in the middle of Thames Valley where there is already a hosepipe ban and no one's got water, you can't put an AI data center there without considering the impact of what it's going to do to water. And that's exactly the same as you can't do a new housing build without that. But for some reason, and this is the thing that's like kind of twisted me up a little bit this week, is that you question data center and it feels like you can't question the mighty data center. It's like, you can't build a data center there. You also can't build a swimming pool. You also can't build houses. It's like, well, you can't tell people not to build a data center because they use loads of water. And it's like, well, I'm saying you can't build anything there without addressing the underlying infrastructure. Yeah. So for me, the opportunity is the data center to solve the water problem in that region and not be a drain, but be a massive benefit to society. Like, you're going in there going, we're going to invest millions in this region. Brilliant. Why don't we invest some of that in water infrastructure? And rather than have this contentious problem of there isn't enough water, it's data centers are helping solve water shortages up and down the country. You want an AI inclusion zone, build a reservoir. Like, support that national infrastructure. You're about to make everyone's lives better in a 100-mile radius. Like, how is that a bad thing to ask?
Yeah.
You know, you're going to build a road network. You want to put fiber in there. You're going to build a power plant. You're going to build a small nuclear reactor. You know, we've got people going, oh, we're going to build SMRs and stuff in Manhattan. You're like, brilliant for power, but you're willing to invest that level of money in getting the power. Could you have a little think about what the water impact is? Because you probably would need to invest a fraction of that to improve community outcomes for everybody. And then data centers are a separate benefit. And that's what the report says. If you don't think about these things, it's a net loss. And I don't care if it's 5 drops of water, it's a net loss. But if you do think about these things, you could make the world better while you're building it. Isn't that cool?
Want to do that?
Who wouldn't want to do that? Who wouldn't want people to say, could you come to where I am and build a data center? Because last time I checked, we got loads better water, transport roads were better, like connectivity was wicked, loads more jobs. Please build 50 data centers where we are. Okay. But if you don't provide that infrastructure and that support, then you're a drain. You're a net drain. Like, we're a data center industry. We seem to have plenty of money to build a lot of complicated machinery, equipment, and facilities. Like, stick some of it back in the communities and not just we planted some trees and created an arboreal forest for biodiversity, or we made sure the bats and the bees were okay. It's like, okay, that's cool, that's important too, but have a look at the water, because you might be able to have a really positive impact there. Let's do that.
No, I totally agree. We're going to round up shortly. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you taking the time, and I know it's quite an emotive topic for you, having had all of this sort of thrown at you for the last couple of weeks. And I really, really appreciate the fact that you've taken the time to speak to us about this. What would you say the emotional impact on you has been over the last couple of weeks of the backlash against this report?
I think the most thing that disappoints me is that you work really hard for an industry to try and put it in its best possible light and try and make improvements. And a lot of it is entrenched old thinking and old people having a pop at you because you question their status quo. And it's a bit sad, to be honest. Like, you want to attract new talent to the industry. You want to attract good people that care. Well, you can't then attack them when they try and help. You can't do that. So I think for me, it's felt like the data industry, personally, has taken a massive step backwards by basically whinging, whining, and looking like spoiled children on this.
It makes me really sad. Yeah. I mean, in 30 years of myself being in this industry, we've spent donkey's years trying to make sure that people actually knew what we did and what good we did. And so for somebody that has also spent almost 30 years loving the industry to be feeling like that makes me really sad. And I do know for a fact that it's not the whole industry, and it's very easy to read those comments and feel that it's the entire industry like that. But hopefully there are huge amounts of people out there that appreciate the fact that you've opened up some of the debate, you've given sensible areas for discussion for solutions going forward, and you've raised a topic that actually, certainly within the UK and probably globally, needs to be higher up on the agenda instead of it just always being focused, as you said, on that energy piece. We'd be delighted at Platform for you to come and speak at our Platform UK event. If you haven't been put too much off the data centres, I realise you might need a little bit of a break at the moment. But just keep on doing the good work that you're doing, because I think having that academic eye and an understanding of the commercial world together is like gold dust across our industry. You've got people that specialise in one or the other, but to be able to understand both, I think our industry really, really needs.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And it puts me off dealing with some people, but it certainly dampen my enthusiasm for what I think is a brilliant industry.
Fantastic.
So let's start acting like it again, eh?
Well, let's hope so. Rich, I am so grateful for you joining me today. Thank you so much. Audience, I hope you've listened to these comments and understand. And if you haven't read the report, because I also believe that people tend to piggyback off other people's comments and then go down the negative route without actually reading anything. One of the downsides of social media in general. But I hope this interview has put the record straight on a few points. So thank you, Rich. Thank you to Dominic Halpin and TechNative for facilitating the interview. And I will see you in our next interview. Thank you very much.